bank won't make change, I close my account instead. This happened a few years ago. I was working at a large national chain restaurant as a manager. I was asked to temporarily reassign to a location in a city about an hour away, and accepted. They put me up in a hotel, the whole 9 yards. The first weekend I was there, I discovered that the GM had screwed up and not ordered any change, small bills/rolls of coins, for the safe, and that the local branch of our bank would be closing in the next. I also happened to have a personal account at the same bank and had, in the past, gone and gotten change from the branch back home. Since time was tight, I quickly looked up the address of the bank, grabbed $800, and jumped in my car. I get to the bank, wait in line, and then ask them to make change. $400 in $5 bills, $300 in $1 bills, and $100 in assorted rolled coin. The teller tells me that the bank doesn't make change. Me, thinking it was because they didn't know me, informed her that our restaurant had an account she could look up. She then told me, no, we don't make change at all. The thought going through my brain was, WTF? You are a bank. I tried explaining the situation, but was quickly shot down. I left, went back to my car, then had an idea. I went back inside the bank with my personal checkbook, got to the front of the line, and, luckily, the same teller. Before she could even greet me, I held out my checkbook and told her, I would like to close this account, since this bank is no longer customer service oriented. She kind of rolled her eyes, but went about my request. Then she asked how I wanted my cash back, an automatic response, I'm sure, and one I was counting on. I said, $400 in $5s, $300 in $1s, $70 in rolled quarters, $25 in rolled dimes, $4 in rolled nickels, and $1 in rolled pennies. The rest can be on a cashier's check. No reason for her to deny it, so I got my change. And the following Monday, I returned, closed out the other 2 accounts I had there, and I opened accounts at a different bank where I have been banking ever since. Edit. I did not open or close any accounts for the business. I closed my personal account and took the payout in small change to help the restaurant, then kept the larger bills for myself. In essence, I made myself into the bank. I made change for the restaurant. On Monday, I closed all of my personal accounts with this bank, and opened new accounts at a different bank, and deposited the $800 in large bills along with the money from my account. Also, this was 15 years ago, so banking at the time was not all done on a smartphone, and none of my bills were autopay. I still wrote check. Now to the comments. I switched to my current bank 14 years ago when my old one refused to make change. A friend needed change and we went to my bank. The teller refused since he didn't have an account. I told her I had an account and she said it was his money, so no. I asked him to borrow money, he handed it to me, and I said it was my money now, and she said no because I was just going to give it back to him. We needed change pretty urgently and he said fine, I will open an account. And she shot him down saying he would close it immediately, and she wasn't stupid. So, I closed my account and went to the bank in the next town and have been with them ever since. What is it to her if you gave borrowed money back to him anyway? This whole thing is just the worst customer service I've ever heard of. Just because the bank may have had a policy against non-customers making change doesn't mean you have to be a dick if there's a way to help out. Like, look for ways to help out despite rigid and non-nuanced rules passed down by faceless corporations. These are people who work for bankers. They are being molded into the type of holier-than-thou type dickheads that give out loans to people who will never be able to pay them back, knowing full well they are ruining lives and destroying family. Very clever and well-deserved. A win for a human, but next guy is still screwed. I also commend you for some fine quick thinking. I have never heard of a ducking bank. That's where the money is, not making change. What in the duck? I'd seriously be interested in knowing what bank, not specific location, it was. Citizens Bank refused to make change for me because I didn't have an account. I was temporarily living in Boston at the time and only had banks in upstate NY and NJ. Now I've moved back permanently and refuse to do business with them even though they're right on the end of my block and right next to my office. Most banks have the silly policy to not make change for non-members. If it's just a matter of a few bills, then what's the problem? Edit, I know why it's a rule. I work at a large bank and know about capacity and counterfeit currency attempts. My response is in regards to this commenter and his request for quarters. I had a bit of the opposite problem. Went to the US and had to get about $1,600. Visited 3 different ATMs because of the limits but ended up with a wad of 20s. At the last bank, I asked that they give me bills of 100 in exchange and they refused. Had to get a manager involved and explain that I got all the money from their machine and how unsafe it was to walk around Chicago in my current state. Thankfully, he agreed. Very similar story, a guy goes into a bank and needs to talk to the bank manager for a specific transaction. The bank manager isn't there, so the guy asks a teller to validate his parking. The teller tells him that she cannot validate his parking because he didn't make a transaction. He goes to the bank across the street and opened up an account. Then he goes back into the original bank and asks for his entire account of millions of dollars to be transferred into the new bank and to shut down his old account. After losing all that money, the teller validated his parking. Sounds like an urban legend, but it's true. He is wearing a worn-out clothes and concerned about a 60 cents parking ticket. That how he become a millionaire. Those stories about US banking here are quite entertaining. Around here, when closing a bank account, the question would be, and what's the account number where the remaining balance should be transferred to? What if you don't want it moved to another account? In the EU, if it's within the withdrawal limit, it's usually 100s or 50s and then best fitting change for the rest. If you're closing 50k or so, you need to either call in advance, or they will refuse. Lack of cash in the bank. Almost all banks in Sweden are now cash-free and proud of it. They simply don't handle cash at all. Only transfers and cards. Was a real hassle when the bank accidentally blocked all my cards from that bank, and it took 5 days to reactivate them. I know it's not the best solution, but the modern way how to account for it, have at least 2 banks. On the second one, keep a low-level credit card. Most credit cards don't calculate percentages for a month after the spending. So, if one bank fails, you have backup while you resolve issues with main bank. Yeah, I did have a card in another bank, but that one isn't accepted everywhere. Amex. I now have cards from 4 banks. I closed a bank account due to a tangentially related situation. My employer at the time only offered paper checks. No direct deposit. 2 years into my employment, he updates the checks slightly. Suddenly, the teller won't let me cash it. They went in the back to discuss it with the manager. They were legit back there for 15 minutes. The teller returned, all smiles and giggles, turned to me straight-faced and stated the manager said no. Since the branch I was visiting was in Walmart, I took my check and cashed it at Walmart's customer service center. No problem. I went back in line, and once I got to the front, I told them I wanted to close my account. All of a sudden, they were willing to cash it. We don't do change bullshit. She probably just didn't want to do her job. Yeah, I feel like the fact the bank was closing soon was a hint here. It was the end of the day and she'd already mentally checked out for the day. Used to work in a bank branch. It's possible that she couldn't get in due to a time delay or other issue. For example, vault teller already left for the day. I had the same thing happen to me, only I need $100 in change and just in 1s, 5, and 10s. I needed to make a deposit into my personal checking account, and my office needed change. My bank was on one side of the street, and the bank my company used was on the other side. Figured why go to both? So, I got to the teller and told her I needed to make the deposit. Then said I needed change. Told her what I needed, and she said, well, you normally have to call ahead for change. I asked, for $100 in 1s, 5s, and 10s? She said yes. I said, oh. I'm sorry. I didn't realize I would need to do that for such a small amount. Then she asked if the change was for me. I said no, it was for work. She asked if the business banked with them, and I said no. She said that she couldn't help me because I didn't call ahead, and the company doesn't bank there. I asked if I could just do it through my account but was told no because there might be a fee. I just stared at her for a minute. I replied, so. You are telling me that even though I bank here and just did a transaction, I cannot get $100 in change because I did not call ahead and my company doesn't bank here, and you will charge me a fee to get change anyway. Now, you want me to get in my car and drive across the street to your competitor instead? She said, "Yes, ma'am." We stared at each other for a few seconds, me incredulously and her very arrogantly. I went across the street, got change, went back to my bank the next day on my lunch break, and closed 3 accounts I had with them. The person who assisted me asked why, and I told her. She was the VP of the branch who was filling in while people were at lunch.